Good morning, everyone, and welcome to First Things First. Jenna Wolfe, Nick Wright, Brandon Marshall, looking dapper, my friend.
Kevin, how do I get my hair like that, Kevin?
Lovely. No, it's not on purpose.
Great.
It's just an accident.
It just happens and just rolls out of bed that way. Gentlemen, it is Veterans Day, and today we do give our thanks to those who serve and those who have served, and we have a fantastic show for you today. Tons of stuff to get to, and we are going to start this morning in Dallas with the Cowboys.
What?
Boys find themselves at a surprising 2-7 on the year. The team some had a good shot of making the Super Bowl. Instead, they got a good shot to land a top 3 draft pick. And if that's the case, could they, should they, would they consider drafting a new quarterback? Here's Jerry Jones on that very topic.
Is it crazy to bring up the idea of taking a quarterback with the 3rd pick or the 2nd pick if you may have it?
Yes. You asked me if it's crazy to bring the idea up, and I'm answering you, yes. We're playing games here, guys, but it's not the thing to be talking about at all. You know, Dak is our quarterback.
You know, the one thing, Nick, you've been on this corner since before we even started talking about Dak's contract. The Cowboys say too much, too early, too soon. They never wait. And yet, once again, Jerry Jones comes out and says, it's Dak, and that's it. Let's move on. But, Brandon, let me start with you first. Should the Cowboys maybe be open to drafting a quarterback? Should the opportunity present itself in the draft this year?
I had the same reaction that Jerry did. Absolutely not. They have their quarterback. That would be crazy. You have your guy. Nick, I had 18 quarterbacks, so maybe it's because of my experience in the NFL playing with so many quarterbacks. Some of them were good, some of them weren't really good. For that reason, when you find a guy, you stay with him. You're in love with him, keep him, make it work. So a lot of people out there are talking about his ankle. Well, I had seven surgeries, and I was still able to make 6 Pro Bowls and play 13 years at a high level. So this is inevitable in the NFL. Guys are going to get injured. So if the goal is to win now, then you double down on Dak Prescott. He was averaging, 400-something yards through the air before he got injured. He just had to clean up the turnovers. So for that reason, you double down on it because you're Jerry Jones. You're looking at your age like, I'm 78. Look, I'm trying to win right now. I don't have, another, 60 years to get this done. So you got to double down on Dak Prescott right now, Nick.
So here's the problem. And this isn't about Dak's ankle, and it's not about Dak's ability. It's about the finite nature of resources in the NFL and how to best spend those resources. I would argue the Cowboys have to be open to any and all possibilities that would allow them to address their gaping hole on their team, which is their defense, and they have to look around the NFL landscape, recognize you can win at the highest levels in the NFL in this generation with a young quarterback, with a quarterback on a rookie contract. And that doesn't mean you go out of your way to move Dak Prescott, but it does mean that if you end up with the 2nd overall pick, which they could, and Justin Fields is there, and you would have the ability of saving $40 million against Dak's new deal, which is pending, and get, I believe, a couple 1st-round picks by trading Dak, you at least have to have those conversations. And Wilds, even if inside the building you have decided we don't love any of these quarterbacks aside from Trevor Lawrence, they're not going to be able to get him, there is no chance we're drafting one. To Jenna's point, you don't say it out loud, because if you do end up with the 2nd pick, you want someone, if you're not going to take a quarterback, to trade you for that pick so you can get extra resources. If the whole world knows you're out of the quarterback business, then they'll be trying to trade with the team with the 3rd pick instead of you. So there's no reason to say this, and Wilds, there's no reason to be this closed-minded about it.
Okay, are you the same guy that lambasted the Packers for taking Jordan Love? Like, the idea that you're going to
Yes.
move off of a franchise quarterback is bonkers to me. And I don't think that, like, the GM pipeline or the GM listening pipeline is necessarily watching First Things First or all these shows. Like, they know it. They know that Jerry Jones is in love with Dak. He would do more harm in saying anything other than it's crazy, it's obvious Dak's our guy.
Yep.
So
Yeah,
let me.
look,
can I just throw something out?
Real quick,
Brandon, go ahead, Nick, and then I'll jump in. Go ahead.
Just you use the Packers example. If the Packers were coming off an awful season, drafted Jordan Love and traded Aaron Rodgers, that is a totally different universe than coming off 13-3 NFC Championship game, draft Jordan Love and keep Aaron Rodgers. So to me, those are, Jenna, those, just to respond, those weren't apples to apples comparisons. The Packers tried a half measure, and half measures are almost always the wrong way to go. Sorry to interrupt you, Jenna. Go ahead.
No, of course. But, Brandon, let me ask you this. We keep talking about how in love Jerry Jones is with Dak Prescott. Jerry Jones has had the last 3 years to sign Dak Prescott. If he was so in love with him, if he was so willing to just pour all this money into their future, this deal would have gotten done. It was over an extra year. Jerry Jones would have said, you're my guy, let's do it. So I find it hard to believe that he's so tied into Dak Prescott that he's like, no matter what happens now, he's our guy. He had his guy. He could have been signed, locked up, and finished already.
Jerry Jones is in love with a lot of people in that locker room, but Jerry Jones is also one of the most savviest businessmen out there. That's why he owns the Dallas Cowboys. That's why his team is worth more than any other team in the NFL. Jerry Jones knows he has the leverage. If the deal wasn't right, if it wasn't sweet, he knew he could lock him up for the next 2 years. Franchise tag this year, franchise tag next year, if they wanted to do it. Now, that would really hit the cap hard, but he know he had that out there. Nick, I just don't understand how you would even have the conversation of moving off Dak, because you can build your defense in the draft. You can build your defense in free agency. And then also, when you made a good point when you talked about, not saying it, because if you land the number 2 overall pick and you know you're going to keep Dak, then you can use that as leverage to have a team come up and trade for that pick and move back. But the problem is this. If you don't answer that question correctly, Dak Prescott and his agency will be calling you asking for answers. So as an owner, as a head coach, you have to do a good job in the media when you have those type of tough questions.
That's totally fair, and you maybe would just need back channel with Dak's people saying, you're going to hear a lot of stuff about us being interested in a quarterback. It's all subterfuge because we're trying to trade the pick. Pay attention to none of it. But listen, I whiffed on the Cowboys this year. But Jenna, my final point would be this. I believe what we've seen from the Cowboys as far as coaching-wise and defensively, that if they had Patrick Mahomes as their quarterback this year, they're not a championship caliber team because the defense is so incompetent. If that's the position you're in, then you have to look for any and all avenues to address the defense. And yes, the draft will be there, but free agency will not be there, Jenna, if they sign Dak, because they're already up against the cap, and then it'd be $40 million per on their quarterback.
That's a great point, Nick. All right, we got to take a turn because of the highlight of all highlights, a classic from Masters practice yesterday. John Rahm on 16. The time-honored tradition of trying to skip the ball across the water onto the green. Perfect skipping across the water. But how perfect is this? How perfect is that?
It's about to stop.
Nick, what would you call this?
Stop.
Would this be skill or would this be luck, buddy? Oh!
I would call this the greatest play in the history of sports. I think this is the greatest highlight in the history of sports. This beats Odell's one-handed catch. This beats Dr. J behind the backboard, then back in front of the backboard. I have never seen something on Twitter that made me stop in my tracks, Wilds, more than this. It skipped 4 times, played the hill, and went in. It's the greatest thing I've ever seen, flatly.
I watched it 100 times as well. You've got a little bit of recency bias. It's certainly on that upper echelon of highlights, but it is not coming close to Vince Carter over Frederick Weiss. It is not the greatest. It's not the greatest shot. Vince Carter still wears the crown, Brandon.
Both of you guys are wrong. It's both, Jenna. It's luck and skill. To be able to do that, it takes a lot of hard work. And Nick, I learned this from you in our production meeting. These guys actually practice this in their practice rounds. A lot of guys try this shot. He happened to make it a hole-in-one. But the reason why I say both of you guys are wrong is because if we're going to call this the greatest play in sports, if it's the greatest play in sports, then we have to throw in all trick shots. The guys that's on the top of buildings, throwing the basketball off of cars, bouncing off of garbage cans, and then going.
No.
Then we have to put in all trick shots. Then. No, it's
no.
But this is a trick shot.
They make a shot into a garbage can? No, because they do it a million times, and then they just put the good one on. All those shots in the garbage can.
I think it's the
garbage can. Not a fan. Bottle flipping. All of it in the garbage. No.
It's the greatest shot for golf.
Cannot see that shot enough. Guys, the latest NBA rumor has this panel in a flutter. Guess who's rumored to be going after Russell Westbrook? The answer might surprise you. Probably will. It's next. First things first. Guess who is rumored to be going after Russell Westbrook? How about the Clippers? Russ has only played one season in Houston after being shipped from OKC in that Chris Paul trade. Clippers trying to overhaul that roster again, one season after acquiring Kawhi and Paul George. So who better to break all of this down than our guy, Chris Broussard? Broussard, good morning to you. Good idea or bad idea for the Clippers to deal for Russell Westbrook?
Well, first of all, to use my favorite Nick Wright word, I would be absolutely gobsmacked if this trade happened. All right. Number one, I've been told this by somebody close to the situation that is not going to happen. Number two, I don't think it makes a lot of sense for the Clippers. If I could get him with Kawhi and Paul George, you might think about it, but I don't know if that could even happen. But here's the deal. The problem with the Clippers, and I've said it many times before last year, was a lack of chemistry. Guys getting used to playing with one another on the court in what became a short and truncated season. And guys adjusting to new and different roles both on the court and off the court. We know that was all a problem. So why in the world would I bring in the greatest, biggest chemistry experiment in the league, the granddaddy of all chemistry experiments? I love Russell Westbrook. He is a first ballot Hall of Famer, but not only that, he will be an icon in the future because of his 3 triple-double seasons. However, Russ is so unique, so different, such an energetic player. He doesn't fit in. He comes in and everything changes. And the Clippers don't have to do that. They're not in that position where they need an overhaul. I mean, maybe if Brandon Marshall was the GM, I think he said weeks ago that he would blow it up. Maybe Brandon would do it. All they need are a few tweaks here and there, additions here and there, and that's not Russ. So, no, I do not like this. Oh, my God.
Okay. I love it. That's exactly what they need.
Well, so here's the deal.
Go ahead, Nick.
The Clippers have 2 major problems. One is, in order to add a truly impactful star-level player, you have to trade Paul George. It's the only way to make the salaries work. So could you trade Paul George for Russ in something? Yeah, you probably could. I don't know if that gets you much closer. I would imagine the Clippers would love to get Drew Holiday. Could you get Drew Holiday and Jackson Hayes for Paul George? Probably. But if you're not trading Paul George, it's just going to be eating around the margins. You're not making any major systemic change. Here, though, is the other problem for the Clippers. Because they lost to the Nuggets, we are all saying, oh, it was chemistry. It was the way they collapsed at the end. The loss to the Nuggets prevented them from seeing in real time over a 7-game series that actually would have been a 5-game series against the Lakers what their real Achilles heel would have been and is going to be next year. A lack of size. So all these things, I know Kawhi Leonard gets to name the arena. He gets to pick when they practice, when the team flight goes. He also evidently gets to build the roster. And he wants high IQ players. I don't know if Russ technically qualifies as that. And he wants a floor general. That's great. You need someone who's 6'11", though, and you ain't got it. And you would have seen that had they played the Lakers. But they flamed out so spectacularly and so historically and so embarrassingly the round before, they didn't even get to see what their real problem is. So, no, you can't make the salaries work realistically, Wilds, unless you're trading Paul George. And I don't think trading Paul George for Russ makes you appreciably better. Yep. So I don't think this is their biggest need, and I don't think it's going to happen, Wilds.
Also, I don't think the Rockets want to do this. I think the Rockets are still closer to missing the playoffs than winning the championship. So I think they need to make a move, but I don't know if it's just sending Russ to another team in the Western Conference makes any sense. Broussard, you brought up an interesting point about Russ being an icon. I think he's in the weird spot where he doesn't necessarily need to win a championship. I think Harden needs to win a championship. I'd like if CP3 won a championship, but for some reason, maybe just because he's such an electric player, Russ doesn't. The other half of this rumor was Russ to New York, and I think it'd be better if Russ just got the keys to the car, could drive it as fast as he wants, could crash it into a few trees if he had to, which will happen, but do it in New York with the bright lights. So I think that's what he needs. That would be best for his legacy moving forward, not to championship chase.
A great point, Wilds. And I've said this. Look, when we think about Oscar Robertson, what's the first thing we think of? He averaged a triple-double for an entire season. It wasn't that, you know what? In 1971, he actually won the championship with Lou Alcindor, now, of course, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I agree. It's the same thing with Russ. His legacy, unless triple-double seasons become commonplace, right? Unless Luka does it and maybe LeBron does it and other players start doing it here and there. His legacy is going to be, this guy was the only player ever to average 3 straight triple-double seasons. It's not going to be about any championship he wins later in his career. So I do agree with you there, although it might make sense for Houston to make this move because you're not winning it with Russ, and he's got 3 years, $132 million left on his deal. So they are wise to start looking around to see what they can get for him because they're built to play small ball. And now that Mike D'Antoni's not the coach, it's going to be tough to play the style that fits this roster.
Well, Chris, you're right. You got me down. You have me down pat. Like, look, this can absolutely work. And the reason why, because what we talked about, a month or two ago when those guys were still in the bubble, they need an attitude adjustment, and Russ can bring that. And a lot of times we say as players, oh, we don't listen to the media, we don't hear you. But there's one thing that we always hear, the thing that the media says over and over and over again. So what you talked about when it came to Russell Westbrook of being that guy who comes in and just changing the entire environment, like he hears that, he knows that. Russ showed last year that he was trying to adapt, that he was trying to change. So with that being understood, Russ can absolutely come in here and be the guy that the Clippers need. Now, for me, the bigger question is not about Russell Westbrook. It's more about James Harden, because if you're talking about moving Westbrook, then who are you going to put next to James Harden? James Harden's not going to sit in Houston just to have a lame duck season. James Harden wants to win a championship. So to me, the conversation quickly shifts from Westbrook. If this is a real conversation, regardless of where he goes, it quickly shifts to what happens to James Harden.
Well, right now, that's why it's a rumor. There is another rumor out there. Another team out west apparently in the market for a point guard. The Phoenix Suns have reportedly discussed trading for the aforementioned Chris Paul from OKC. Suns were the bubble darlings, remember, going an impressive 8-0. Broussard, let me send it back to you. That's a young team out there. How much would they benefit from adding a vet like Chris Paul?
This one I like. I think the Suns would benefit greatly if they could add Chris Paul. I think it'd be very similar to what happened with Oklahoma City. You know, he would be able to come in, he would increase their basketball IQ, he would bring a winning attitude and pedigree. He played for Coach Monty Williams once before in New Orleans, so there's chemistry there. He would help the young players develop without, and this is important, without getting in their way. He wouldn't hinder the growth and development and push to stardom of Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton, just like he didn't do that with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in Oklahoma City. Now, does this make them a contender in the West? No, not by a long shot. But it would make them one of those teams fighting for the 6th, 7th, or 8th seed in the Western Conference playoffs.
Yep.
And when you're a team that hasn't been to the postseason in 10 years, you'll take that. So I think this would be good if the Suns could do it.
Jeez.
It would be a franchise-changing move for the Suns because of Broussard's point that they haven't been to the playoffs since Devin Booker was in junior high school. But I have the flip side to this, which is because the Suns went 8-0 in the bubble, people are assigning them a level of expectation for this upcoming year that is not only unrealistic, it is an impossibility. Here's my first major NBA prediction for the coming season. Barring a change like this, the Suns are drawing dead to make the playoffs.
Sure.
People got to look at what the West actually is. You've got 6 teams that, again, barring injury, are locked into the playoffs. Lakers, Nuggets, Warriors, Clippers, Utah, and who am I forgetting? An obvious one. Dallas, pardon me. I think Houston, James Harden's never missed the playoffs in his life. I think Houston is very close to being a lock. You then have another 7 teams that think they're going to be in. Minnesota doesn't have their pick next year. They think they're going to be in. Phoenix thinks they're going to be in. Sacramento, after getting into the bubble, thinks they're going to be in. Memphis obviously thinks they're going to be in. And I'm leaving teams out. The Phoenix, as presently constituted, is not good enough. But Wild's adding Chris and also allowing Ayton and Booker to learn the difference between statistically glamorous basketball and winning basketball in the final moments would be absolutely worth the tax of the late phase of his contract. So I would do this if there was any way to do this. If I were Phoenix, I would do it. But without it, this is a 32-win basketball team.
You think they
like
make the
that
playoffs, Nick, with Chris Paul, though?
I do.
Do they make it with Chris Paul?
I think they would make the play. I do, Broussard, Wilds. I do think they'd make it with Chris Paul.
But nobody thinks they win a championship, right? No one. I don't think Chris Paul thinks they win a championship. No. Chris Paul's 35 and owed a bunch of money. And Broussard, like I said, I do think Chris Paul needs a ring. I think Chris Paul is getting a little bit of like Garnett territory. Like everybody would remember him as an all-time great player. But if you can get that one ring, we move you up into another stratosphere. And for those reasons, I only think there's 3 teams Chris Paul should be considering. 1, your Lakers, Knicks. 2, the Philadelphia 76ers. And 3, go to Milwaukee and win with Giannis. If those are the only teams I think he should be worried about and be thinking about. Now, I know he wants to be sort of close to home. That's an issue. He's got some family issues with Alfonso Ribeiro pretending to be his dad. So I know that's an issue. You want to be close because you got a fake dad in there screwing things up. So all things being said, I think the Lakers would be the best move, Brandon. But I think he should go after a ring in one of those 3 cities.
No, you're right. I absolutely love this for the Suns. I think Devin Booker is that good. I think with Chris Paul, call me the ultimate optimist. I think they can potentially get the 4 or 5 seed when you talk about the playoffs. But I don't love this for CP3. I want CP3 to win a championship. Wilds, I'm just like you. Milwaukee Bucks are sitting out there. That would be perfect for you. And the other team, which I think is the best team for him, is the Philadelphia 76ers. If he can find a way to get there, man, this will be an exciting NBA season. The East will be up for it will be up for grabs now because right now I think the Nets got a stronghold on it.
everyone better get to work. It feels like the season starts like tomorrow. Chris Broussard, thank you so much. As always, we got a special guest joining us next. One of the most popular drivers on the NASCAR circuit, Chase Elliott, coming off his 2020 championship, joins us live. This is First Things First.
The 24-year-old from Dawsonville, Georgia, is about to join his father, Awesome Bill, in elite company. Chase Elliott is a NASCAR Cup Series champion.
I love it so much. That was Chase Elliott taking home the 2020 NASCAR Cup Series championship. Just this past Sunday, jubilation run amok. Chase gracious enough to get up and join us this morning. He might still be on a high from all of it. Chase, thank you for being with us. So much I want to get to, but first take us back to Sunday. It's been an amazing season for you, capped off by that race. Just tell me what the experience was like.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been an incredible year, really. I appreciate y'all having me this morning. I've lost my voice. I've had a long couple days, so don't judge me.
Understandable.
But it's been amazing and just still really still soaking it all in. This is all new for me. I've never done this before, so just been incredible. Couldn't ask for anything more.
Chase, my dad was a firefighter, and I say that because growing up, I think everyone around him assumed I was going to be a firefighter. It's one of those jobs where, a lot of fathers, sons, uncles, It's family business almost. Racing is a lot like that, too. I obviously went a different path. You followed in your dad's footsteps, and you heard it in the call. He won the Cup Championship, in 1988, and now you've won it in 2020. I ask you, A, what does it mean to kind of carry on that legacy? But also, at what age did you know, I'm going to do what Daddy does?
Yeah, that's a good point, and I feel like, my parents, first off, they were just so supportive and like racing was never their decision. And I really respected that from them. And they always kind of let me decide what I wanted to do. But I thought I wanted to go race at like 8, and I started race go-karts and things at that time. But obviously then, it's just a having fun hobby thing. I would say when I was probably, 12, 13, things started to get a little more serious. And it was at that point in time that I think I really kind of clicked with it and wanted to continue. And been super lucky. I had some great opportunities, and yesterday or Sunday was a dream. So just still trying to figure it out.
Chase, Brandon Marshall here. Super excited to have you. Thank you, man, and congratulations. You probably won't remember this, but 2 years ago, I got an opportunity to shake your hand, take a picture, and it's okay if you don't remember. There was a lot of people around, but I was in line, and I was able to take a picture with the great one. So I want to say thank you for that. But look, you talk about this dream. At the age of 6, I had this dream to become a football player in the National Football League. Right, and that's what I worked for from that moment on. What did it feel like when that confetti came down? What is that feeling? I understand what that feeling is of getting drafted. I understand that feeling of scoring a touchdown in a big game and signing big contracts. But like, this is the ultimate thing that you could have done. Like, what is that feeling?
Yeah, well, first off, I appreciate it, and to answer your question is, honestly, like nothing else. And then another piece of the puzzle that I feel so lucky to have experienced is I got to experience it with my family and the people that really paved the way for me to have that moment on Sunday. And, I feel like it's already a dream to even achieve it, but to be able to enjoy that moment with my mom and dad and Mr. Hendrick and all these people who have, given me these great opportunities over the years. It was icing on the cake. So I couldn't ask for a better situation and to spend it with, my parents and Mr. Hendrick and Alan and just the whole group. It's been a special few days for sure.
Chase, I've got a 2-part question. The first one I think we just have to address right off the bat. Huge trophy. That trophy is it's a monstrous
Yeah,
trophy. I don't know where you're going to do it. It's just a monster trophy. It's fantastic. I don't know if you need to call a contractor and add an extra room onto your home, but just monster trophy. I love it. Second part of the question is this. Jimmy Johnson, obviously leaving NASCAR. What has he done for you? And do you feel any pressure to live up to sort of following his footsteps at Hendrick?
Yeah, well, first off, the trophy is big, and it's heavy, too. I mean, it took about all I had to lift that thing up. So, but, you know, Jimmy's been such a stand-up guy. I mean, all the things everybody talks about him is the way he carries himself. I mean, obviously his on-track success speaks for itself, but, you know, I think what everybody that has had the pleasure of knowing Jimmy is most proud of him and most grateful for is his friendship and the type of example he sets off the racetrack, because I'm not sure that there's one that does it any better than him. So just proud to have had him as a friend all these years. Going to continue that friendship. He's been as big of a cheerleader and supporter as anybody this past week, and then us winning on Sunday on his last race. I mean, it was just unreal. Great experience. So happy to call him a friend, and I wish him the very best as he moves on.
All right, Chase, real quick. Antonio Cromartie, Darrelle Revis, some of my fiercest competitors that I've gone against in my competition. Who's that guy for you, this journey to lead to this? Who was that guy you had to battle this year?
And that's a good one. I feel like there's really only a few guys that I care about a whole bunch and are close friends to, and really the rest of them I feel like are about on the same bottom of the board, that they all share it together.
So you're basically saying there's so basically you're saying there's only a couple good drivers and great teams, and everybody else is just...
There's only a couple good guys. It's the other way around. There's only 2 or 3 good ones.
Love it. You want to tell us who those
Elliott,
2 or 3 are?
I don't know if he wants to. I think that's what we're getting at. We thank you so much. It's been such an amazing season. We got through the interview. No one made any Days of Thunder references, which is like huge. I know you said you're losing your voice. It's going to be a sleepless couple of days. Enjoy it, though. It's really been fun getting to know you and getting some insight. So congratulations again, and thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
We're going to take a break. Coming up, we're breaking out Nick's newly adjusted NFL tiers. There has been movement, folks. Movement in the tiers. You don't want to miss it.
Some major change. It's the committee's most controversial week.
Hi, I'm Sergeant Jacob Hetherington from the Action Shooting Team, and I wish everyone a happy Veterans Day.
Welcome back here on First Things First as we continue to celebrate and honor those who serve and those who have served. Fox Sports salutes proudly them and, of course, their families as well. All right, we are going to take a turn now. It is Wednesday, which can mean only one thing. It was a fairly unpredictable weekend in the NFL, which means an updated version of our guy Nick's NFL tiers. We got some movement in the ranks, Nick. Please.
All right, do not reveal them yet. Do not reveal them yet, Keta. I just need to prepare everyone. Okay. Not only major movement, a total readjustment, and for the first time
I don't like it.
In the illustrious history of the committee and the tiers, there has been a relegation. All right, show the tiers. As always, direct your eyes to the bottom of the screen and move up. The bottom tier is now the NFC East. And before we go through the rest, what you're going to notice is what's missing. The Jets are out. The Jets no longer deserve to be included. Well, no. Don't show this yet. Can we go back to my full tiers, please? We're moving too quickly. The Jets are out. They're gone. NFC East is the bottom of the barrel. Adam Gase is somewhere looking up for his team. There he is. And you're not going to find him. They're gone. Now we'll go to mock draft season. The Lions have moved down to mock draft season. The Jags have always been there. The Bengals feel good about Burrow, but not much else. The Texans, it's mock draft season, and they don't even have their own draft picks. All right, this next tier is somewhat interesting. I put still fighting. These are teams that on any given weekend could be a pain to play and could be a handful to deal with. The Falcons with Raheem Morris, the Vikings with Dalvin Cook, the Chargers with Herbert, but they're not going to be a playoff team. So now we can get to the teams that truly matter. This tier right here, AFC playoff battle, 3 spots, 5 teams. They're going to battle it out. The Dolphins and the Bills for the AFC East, and whoever doesn't get it will be fighting with the Browns, Colts, and Raiders for the final 2 wild card spots in the AFC. So there will be 3 playoff teams from that tier. 2 will be going home. Then we get to the real contenders, but the ones with a major flaw. For the Seahawks, it's obviously their defense. For the Cardinals, who have moved up, it is obviously their lack of experience. For the Titans, it's their defense. And for the Rams and the Bucks, it's the massive questions about their quarterback. Then you get to the cream of the crop. Championship caliber. Saints, Ravens, Packers, Steelers. These are the best teams in football aside from the defending champion. Number 1 contender, there isn't one. That was the Steelers. But the Steelers' shaky performance this week against the Dallas Cowboys, having that game come down to a final heave from Garrett Gilbert. A week after a game came down to a final heave by Lamar Jackson. A week after a game came down to a final kick by Steven Gostkowski that missed. 3 weeks in a row, they could have been beaten on the final play of the game. You're no longer the number 1 contender. And then the champs stay the champs. So there's the tiers. The committee had some hard soul searching. Do we kick the Jets out? Yes. Do we leave a tier vacant? Yes. So that's where we're at. Wow. Brandon Marshall, this will finally be the week, I am convinced, that you say, Nick, you and the committee got it exactly right.
Absolutely not. A few issues here. Number 1, I asked you nicely not to disrespect the Jets anymore earlier in the show, and you doubled down. You don't even have the Jets on your tier list. That's unbelievable. Where's the Jets? That's unbelievable. But look, all right, we're going to skip over that. You don't respect the Jets. You just totally ignored me. So let's go down. Let's go to my number 1 issue, and that's the number 1 contender. I have an issue with this. There's 5 teams that should be there. The Saints, the Ravens, the Steelers, the Bucks, and the Seattle Seahawks. They're all contenders. What do we call contenders? And I would also ask this, Wilds, okay? Because I know you always petition the committee. I think we need to petition the committee to add another tier. And this tier would be watch out tier. Because the Chiefs, your champs. They're the champs. They should stay right there until somebody knock them off. But they definitely need to watch out because they have the hardest remaining schedule. There's a chance that they could potentially be the 4th, the 5th seed with this remaining schedule. So I petition the committee to add a watch out tier, Nick. Can we get that done? Look at this schedule. Look at this remaining. You already lost to the Las Vegas Raiders, and you have them. The Bucks is still a really good team. It's going to be a defining moment for the Bucks. Whilst I will say this, if you want to know who is the real deal in the NFL, just watch the Chiefs games for the remaining of the season.
Nick, would you like to respond, or would you like to hear my petition to the gentleman from Kansas City?
I'll just respond quickly. That Chiefs remaining schedule, you know what it looks like to me? 14-2 at worst. Maybe they split with the Saints and Bucks, but their basement is 14-2. So the remaining schedule, be damned, that team, there is no concern. So I don't even, 14-2 at worst. Probably 15-1, but 14-2 at worst. Wilds, what is your issue with the committee, Wilds? What's your beef?
I, Kevin Wilds, would first like to respond to criticism of my petitions when people ask, Kevin, why are you doing this in kind of a parliament theme? I do not know, nor is it any of your business. But Kevin Wilds would like to petition the gentleman from Kansas City to move the Steelers up to the number 1 contender status for the following reasons I will lay out henceforth. Number one, it wasn't an ugly win last week. Some people will say, hey, you snuck one out of Dallas. Wrong. They came back from a 15-point deficit. A win is a win, and they have 8 of them and 0 losses. The idea that the committee is penalizing a team that continues to find ways to win and may do so all the way to Tampa is ludicrous. Reason number 2. Underrated offense. As we talk about high-powered offenses in the NFL, no one mentions good old Big Ben and his 2 knees of indiscriminate health. The Seahawks lead the league in points per game at 34. Then it's the Chiefs. Then it's the Packers. Then it's the Saints. And just underneath the 30-point margin is the Steelers at 29.4. Yes, folks, no one will tell you this. But the Steelers have the 5th best scoring offense in the league. And finally, it is that vaunted defense. It is the Ravens, the Rams, and then basically the Colts, Dolphins, and Steelers tied for third, giving up 20 points. So, Nick, it is for these reasons, and also the obvious reason that they're undefeated.
I'm like trying to
the Steelers are the number 1 contender.
Wilds, listen, the committee knows all those facts you just gave, and what it sounds to me like is the Steelers have the 6th ranked offense and the 6th ranked defense. That's what you just laid out there.
No.
So if you want to somehow 6 plus 6 is 12 divided. No,
they're third. The defense, they're all tied. It's 20, 20.1, 20.1.
Yeah, okay, that's great. 6th best offense, call it the 4th best defense. That ain't the number 1 contender. And I am not going to just gloss over the fact that for 3 weeks in a row, their games came down to the final play of the game. There is only one team, I'm giving them credit. There is only one team in the league clearly better than them. The Chiefs. But I no longer can say definitively they are better than those other excellent contenders. It's not, again, if you want to do a standings, Wilds, you can do a standings.
No.
They're atop the standings. They're not atop the tiers or the power rankings, Wilds.
Really quick, Brandon, because I have one bonus mention for the committee. The Ravens have had ugly games. The Packers had a ugly game to the Bucs. The Steelers have not had ugly games. They had games that were close that they ended up winning. The idea that they're on the same tier as the Packers, who got smashed by a team that's below them in the tier, is just offensive to me. And honestly, I didn't want to go here.
Offensive.
It makes me question the integrity of the committee. I'm sorry. Someone has to say it. This committee...
Listen...
There are some questions about
it. Brandon, I think echoes it. I understand you guys are much more comfortable with the standings. And you can open up USA Today and see the standings. This involves nuance and investigation. And the committee has not been overwhelmingly impressed with the Steelers.
Who is this committee? Who's on this committee?
You know what?
Who's on this committee?
We were going to reveal... Brandon, we were going to reveal the committee this week.
You don't have anybody in the tier.
We were going to reveal the committee this week, but there were too many threats. There was too many threats
we're going to have much more on this coming up later in the show.
Asked to remain anonymous.
Guys, have we seen the end of Dak Prescott in Dallas? Tell you why Jerry Jones was asked that very question and how he answered it. That's next. First things first. Tonight, don't miss the action from the Spring League. It's an elite professional football development league featuring some of the biggest names from the top college programs in the country taking their game to the next level. It all starts at 8 Eastern tonight on FS1 and the Fox Sports app. Back here talking football now. The NFL owners passed a resolution yesterday that would reward teams for developing minority coaches and executives with draft pick compensation. Teams that lose a minority coach or executive to a head coach or GM job with another team will receive third-round compensatory picks for 2 consecutive years. Brandon, I'll start with you here. What was your reaction to this report?
Mixed reaction here. I think we're moving in the right direction, but also it's sad that we have to put these type of things in place in 2020 to get people just a look at certain jobs and certain positions. But I will say this. Let's be honest here. The Rooney Rule hasn't worked. Coming into 2020, there was 4 minority head coaches, 2 minority general managers. It hasn't worked. But Troy Vincent, VP of Football Operations, he's putting things in place. He's doing a great job of trying to figure out how do we fix this issue. This is one of many things. So basically what they're saying is that old way of thinking, how we used to do things in the past where not only in sports but across all industries where my qualified minority men and women, if I recommend them, I'll lose them. So let me not say anything and let me hold on to them. So now we're rewarding the teams that are developing the minority men and women. But I think the biggest flaw in what they're doing here is it's not rewarding the teams that's actually hiring and making decisions to bring in that recommended group. So this is a good step in the right direction. But at the end of the day, it's still sad that we have to put these things in place. Troy Vincent, great job, VP of Operations, for trying to get this done and shifting the narrative in sports. And once it happens in sports, then it's going to happen across culture and then other industries. Great job, Troy Vincent.
So here's why I'm glad, Brandon, and I echo everything you said about Troy, who's a great man and does great things in the league. Why I'm glad that the draft pick compensation would go to the team that cultivated the talent and then lost the talent rather than the team that's hiring the person. Because if it was the team that, if you hire a black head coach or hire a minority general manager and you get a draft pick, for some folks, even if they were being intellectually dishonest and just trying to muddy the waters, they would add an asterisk almost to those hires. Like, yeah, did you get the job because you were the best guy, or did you get the job because the team, you were close to the best guy and they get a 3rd round pick to go along with it? So this removes that asterisk associated with it. So that's first point. I think it's very smart in that regard. Second point is this. This is where you must address these issues. I'm going to talk about our industry. Sports media, sports television and radio has a major problem, and it gets glossed over, of lack of minority voices on the air that aren't former athletes. There are not a lot on national television or radio, black or Hispanic or Asian, whomever, folks that took my path, love sports, studied it, went to school, and now have this massive platform. It's a bunch of white guys and a bunch of minorities that played sports, with a few Stephen A. Smiths, Michael Wilbons that have kind of threaded the needle there. Why is that? In large part, it's because at the entry-level jobs, at the smaller markets, at the smaller television and radio stations, they're not hiring black people. They're not hiring minority candidates. And so I didn't start here. I went Kansas City to Houston to here. Well, a big problem is the Kansas City's, Houston's, whomever, aren't giving people that don't look like me a chance. Same thing's going on in the NFL. It's that you're not getting on the track to be GM or the track to be offensive genius head coach if you're not a white guy. So this, I think, will change that dynamic considerably. And lastly, I will speak to my fellow white folks. We've got to do a better job of seeing a disproportionately white workforce in certain industries and assuming it was a meritocracy. Seeing that there's 96% of the people that in this position are white, it must have been the best person got the job. It wasn't. That's not how this works. You call it a meritocracy when it actually wasn't a meritocracy. So, Brian, I think this is an excellent step. I think it's a necessary step. And I actually think this step will affect actual change.
Nick and Brandon, I agree with everything you guys have said. And I certainly applaud Troy Vincent and the NFL for what they're continuing to do. They're continuing to push the narrative and continue to push teams to say, hey, we got to look within ourselves, and we got to look at our coaching ranks. We got to look at our GM and upper level ranks as well to try to hire these minorities. So I certainly applaud them for that. It is disappointing, Brandon, that now we still are forcing the NFL to try to put minorities in a place where they probably should already be. Look at the NFL as far as the players. 70% or more of the players are African Americans, minorities. So there should be representation in the coaching ranks as well as the GM ranks. And I'll give you a great example. And Brett Veach is a guy I played against in college, but he started back with the Eagles back in 2004 as an intern, worked his way up to a coach's assistant, worked his way up to a scout, and then they moved to Kansas City with Andy Reid. At that point, he's a pro and college personnel analyst. He was a co-director of player personnel. Then he became the GM. But to Nick's point, you got to get these minorities in early. They have to be the quality control guys. They have to be the guys that have the ability, video coordinators, so they can work their way up to at some point they can be with the coach, build that long-standing relationship, build that situation where now the coach trusts them and have seen his hard work. So now the coach will say, you know what, I want you to be my guy that is in head of the scouting program. I want you to be the guy that's in head of the pro personnel. I want you to be my GM. But if they don't get those jobs, to Nick's point again, they're early on, they can't build that development. And in my 40 years, and I'm 41 years old, obviously, I have not seen an African-American, a minority, go from the lower levels and work his way up over time. And that's disappointing.
Yeah, well said, Brian. I have a few things. First one is the NFL has been very transparent about this process. And if you're more interested, I'm going to read the URL just to make sure I get it right. You can go to operations.nfl.com and search for the diversity and inclusion report. And it's 40 pages and it's got everything that you've ever wondered about. And all the data is tracked. So the work is being done. And some of these recommendations that this group is putting forward are we're seeing in like this resolution that just passed. But Troy Vincent on this podcast with Peter King said, you know, this is just one part of a multi-layered strategy. And specifically, he said, I want to get the quote right, this was a complete reform of the system that not only involves draft pick, but early on like anti-tampering policy, so that teams are being rewarded for developing rather than other teams sort of holding back opportunities or even the ability to interview, because that would be considered tampering. And they said when they brought that up, they had heard about that happening because teams are working in their best interest and not maybe in the best interest of the entire league. Brandon, go ahead. I know you wanted to get in.
Yeah, so Brian, you know what I would like to see happen and what needs to happen? And we've had these conversations before when we broke down the Rooney Rule. The last 5 years, every year we're talking about the Rooney Rule. What I think what needs to happen needs to start from the top. I think the NFL needs to hire, whether it's a chief people officer or just an executive, someone who can work with the owners. That is the issue. So we can talk all we want about starting from the bottom and starting with head coaches and play callers, general managers, but the people who make the decision, they're going to hire people who they can relate to, people that they understand, people that looks like them. That is the issue. I'm not going to say it's racism. It's not always that. You don't have to go that far. But when whatever industry we're in and we make key decisions, we typically go with the people that look like us, that we can sit down and have dinner with. But if you don't understand me with my dreads, if you don't understand that I come from Pittsburgh and, you know, I didn't have the same upbringing as you and I don't use the same words that you use, my demeanor is a little different, then you're probably not going to hire me because you're probably going to be a little uncomfortable. So for me, it starts at the ownership level, working with them to understand that it's okay to hire somebody who may not come from where you come from and may not look how you look.
Brandon, I think you're right. Getting the owners to understand that, but also getting the owners to understand that these people, minorities, have the ability to think the same way, to be able to cultivate talent, to be able to be leaders of men, not just at the coaching rank, but at the upper level ranks too. And getting next to those owners certainly is a big part of it. And maybe that position that you're speaking of will help to get that going.
And again, we applaud Troy Vincent for once again trying to move this forward. All right, we'll get back to on the field. Nick and his NFL tier committee met late into the night. There's been movement. Nick is exhausted from staying up all night. We're going to set it all up. Maybe get the committee on the phone. I don't know. That's next. First things first. Tomorrow, division rivals square off as the Colts and Titans battle for first place in the AFC South. It all starts 7:30 Eastern on Fox NFL Network and streaming on Prime Video. That's going to be fun. Welcome back. First things first, Dallas has an interesting dilemma on their hands, sitting at 2-7 with a quarterback out for the season and with a good chance at the top 3 pick in the draft. Would it be so far-fetched to think maybe they go after a quarterback? Jerry Jones was asked about that yesterday. Take a listen.
Is it crazy to bring up the idea of taking a quarterback with the 3rd pick or the 2nd pick if you may have it?
Yes. You asked me if it's crazy to bring the idea up, and I'm answering you, yes. We're playing games here, guys, but it's not the thing to be talking about at all. You know, Dak is our quarterback.
All right, Brandon, should the Cowboys should they just consider thinking about possibly maybe going after quarterback in the draft, given everything that they've got sitting in front of them right now?
Absolutely not, Jenna. And look, preparing for this show, I got to do 2 things. I gotta figure out how do I feel about the topic, and then I also got to figure out how does Nick Wright feel about the topic, especially when we're talking about quarterbacks. So what I usually do when we have a conversation around quarterbacks, I say, what's the most logical thing here? And I say, okay, Nick is going to do the opposite. I know Nick is going to say something outlandish. You have your quarterback, Nick. You have your quarterback. Why would you even consider? Why would you think about bringing in someone else? You have Dak Prescott averaging 450-something yards through the air. That's your guy. Stick with him. For me, Jenna, for me, Nick, Brandon, you have your guy. You ride it out. You're Jerry Jones. You're 78 years old. You want to win now.
Here's why you have to at least consider it, especially if you end up with the 2nd pick of the draft and you could have Justin Fields. Let me ask you this, Brandon. Honest question. The Cowboys of this season, as presently constituted, if Patrick Mahomes were their quarterback, would they be the Super Bowl favorites in the NFC with the other issues on the team? If they had Mahomes, would they be the favorites in the NFC?
No.
Well, that right there is why you have to consider it. It's not about Dak. It's not about Dak not being good. It's about you've got your strapped for cash and your roof's leaking and your foundation's cracked and you love the Rolls Royce in the driveway, but you might need to sell it to fix these other things. If you have the ability to draft a
lose another 10 years in a row.
What? But hold on,
Brandon. Then you're going to lose another 10 years in a row.
The Cardinals are competing right now. The Ravens competed last year and are competing right now. The Chiefs are competing
because they have their quarterback. That's the thing. That's one of my pet peeves. It was always one of my things as a player. New regime come in, and the first thing they do is like, who can I get rid of? No, you have your talent. You don't get rid of talent. You keep talent. You have your quarterback. You just mentioned them, Lamar Jackson. You mentioned the Arizona Cardinals. They have their quarterback. It's easy to go in free agency. It's easy to go in the draft and go get 1 or 2 pieces and a coach put together a real scheme that can help this defense. You don't need this defense to be top 5. You just need this defense to slow them down just a little bit and get the ball back to Dak.
Go ahead, Wilds.
Nick,
Wilds?
I don't understand your rationale at all. Usually I have a pretty solid understanding of what your plan is. But I really don't, unless you've got some intel on Justin Fields where he's better than Dak, but you want to trade Dak? You want to use Dak as leverage over this? I don't understand what you would want to do. It almost feels like you're talking about the Texans, where you got a great quarterback and the rest of the team is in a rebuilding phase.
Well, listen, it's fair. The Cowboys are a far superior team than the Texans. They have 0 more victories than them. But so here's the situation they're in. If you're the Cowboys, it is not about Justin Fields being better than Dak. It is about you have a finite amount of ways to make your team better, and you must have the meeting to discuss is the best way to make our defense passable, freeing up $30 million of cap space, acquiring additional first-round picks by trading Dak, if we believe a Justin Fields could give us 80% of Dak's production at 20% of the cost, and you could address other needs. It's not an anti-Dak position. It's a how bad the rest of the team is position that they have to at least have the meeting, Jenna. They got to have the meeting. You got to talk about it.
So in 2018, when you guys didn't have the defense, should have get rid of Mahomes.
We got to go.